I never expected that shooting my boss in the head would only be the start of my problems. In most workplaces, pulling the trigger on your superior would at minimum lead to prison time, if not a swift trip to the electric chair. But I don't work in a normal place. My name is Stephen Barry. I used to have a more formal title, something like Assistant Director of Research, though my official role has changed so often that I've lost track. My job site is unofficially called Ashurst State Penitentiary, though the Federal Research Bureau, FRB, and the Imperium have different official designations for it. Something like Fey Containment and Assessment Facility 13. We, the staff, use the moniker Ashurst, or the prison, or if we're feeling theatrical, the pit. It depends on who's talking. In short, it's a giant underground, above-ground fortress lab that houses, studies, and ultimately controls the most dangerous supernatural beings. Werewolves, vampires, demons, sirens, ghouls, incubi, half-breed chimeras, and the occasional bizarre old fae that defies easy classification. They're all thrown under the broad label fae, though it includes many that don't fit classical definitions. From the outside, Ashurst might look like a squat complex of drab concrete buildings, watchtowers, fences, and barbed wire. But the real action happens underground, in labyrinthine corridors built decades or centuries ago, each sub-level layered with wards, sigils, runes, and advanced technologies to keep monstrous inmates subdued. The Imperium invests a fortune in updating these wards every year, and the FRB uses it as a research zone to better understand how to neutralize, harness, or occasionally weaponize Fey abilities. I began here as a naive researcher doctor, bright-eyed about the chance to do real good. Maybe find a more compassionate way to treat monsters, who might just be misunderstood. By year 2, I realized compassion was in short supply. Some staff only saw the inmates as experiments or animals that needed a cage. Others, like me, believed we could salvage or rehabilitate some. All it would take was leadership with a willingness to see the inmates as something other than test subjects. Enter Warden Rick Russman, an ex-military Hulk with a neck as thick as my torso and a handgun perpetually on his belt. He ended up in charge, albeit temporarily, after the real Warden Elizabeth Parker had to handle a major fiasco in another FRB branch. Russman believed in one rule: if an inmate even sneezed the wrong way, kill them. No nuance, no mercy. In many ways, he ran Ashurst like a war zone, lines of armed guards patrolling with silver-laced bullets for werewolves, wood stakes for vampires, iron rods for fae, you name it. Step out of line, a bullet to the head. His method was effective at preventing large-scale riots, but the cost in inmate lives was horrifying. He'd execute them for minor infractions. Staff morale plummeted. Tension soared. Meanwhile, I tried to speak up, suggesting that we could handle lesser offenses with proportionate response. Russman ignored me, often telling me, "Go back to your textbooks, Barry, and let real men do the job." Some of my co-workers practically worshipped Russman's results. They said at least we had no catastrophic escapes under him. But I saw a powder keg forming. Fae, especially vampires or werewolves, are proud and cunning, and repeated brutal killings risked inciting them to attempt a mass breakout. Some older staff whispered that the new warden's approach was reminiscent of the old days, when Ashurst was basically a death camp for Fae. I wrote a few polite reports urging restraint, but Russman never answered. Then came the final straw. A young werewolf named Regina, recently admitted for accidentally mauling someone in self-defense. She was stressed, borderline traumatized, and made a small misstep, snarling at a guard who tried to provoke her for fun. Russman declared it was reason enough to shoot her. I intervened, pointing out that we needed to isolate her, not kill her. He aimed his gun at my chest, claiming I was insubordinate and incompetent. In that moment, with Regina cowering behind me, I realized Russman was about to murder us both. Reflex took over. I pulled my own sidearm and shot him right between the eyes. The muzzle flash etched itself into my memory. Russman dropped, dead in an instant, blood pooling across the hallway floor. I expected to be arrested or vanish under suspicious circumstances. Instead, after a brief meltdown among staff, the real Warden Parker returned and launched an investigation. She interviewed multiple staff who attested that Russman threatened them, or the inmates. She found my account credible, ruling I'd acted in defense of staff and inmates. That alone stunned me, but the bigger shock was that Parker wanted me to stay on. She considered my proposed approach for tiered confinement and potential rehabilitation more rational than Russman's. She recognized that not every monstrous being is irredeemable, especially if they're in for lesser crimes or if they're forced into aggression by their nature. Thus, I remained at Ashurst as a kind of special project lead, albeit with less formal authority than before. Some staff eyed me warily as the man who killed the warden and got away with it. Others saw me as a hero for stopping Russman's madness. The inmates, if anything, respected me more for saving Regina's life. So things calmed down, or so I thought. A month later, around 3 a.m., I woke to find a shape at the foot of my bed. My bedroom is a small place on Ashurst's staff housing block. Normally, I keep a small lamp on for comfort because working in a monster prison can give you a fear of pitch darkness. That night, the lamp's glow revealed a silhouette. I blinked, half awake, unsure if it was a shadow from a passing car outside, but then I saw eyes, dark, hateful eyes. I leaned up, fumbled for the lamp's switch to brighten it. The figure vanished instantly. My heart hammered. Was that Russman's face? I told myself it was a dream. Then it happened again the next night, and the next, each time the silhouette more distinct, staying a few seconds longer before disappearing. By the end of that week, I couldn't deny it. Russman's ghost was haunting me. The bullet hole was faintly visible in his forehead if I squinted in that half-light, though I tried not to look too closely. Our building has wards to keep out intangible creatures, but evidently Russman overcame them from within. I tried ignoring him, thinking maybe if I gave him no reaction, he'd fade. This is a place of near-daily crises, sirens enthralling guards, minotaurs smashing through sub-levels, vampires slipping out of containment. In that context, a ghost in my bedroom almost seemed lesser, but ignoring him only let him gather strength. Before long, poltergeist activity began. I woke to the sound of objects slamming against walls. Small cracks formed in my ceiling. Then, in the break room, a chunk of the overhead panel nearly crushed me. Dr. Samaras, who was present, recognized the spectral signature of Russman swirling around me. She insisted we get help. So one day, Samaras marched me to Parker's office to demand an exorcism or banishment. Parker, not wanting her staff dropping like flies, agreed. She called in a favor from a family of vampire witches known as the Di Cesares. They're infamous in certain circles for advanced necromantic and spiritual arts. By evening, Ophelia Di Cesare arrived at Ashurst. Ophelia was a slight woman with layered black hair, decorated with small rings and charms that tinkled softly when she walked. Her arms and ankles displayed swirling tattoos of runes and zodiac-like patterns. Despite her mild voice, she radiated an aura of deep, ancient knowledge. She told Parker and me that Russman's poltergeist had advanced alarmingly quickly, meaning we had no time to lose. A typical ghost might take months to figure out how to move a spoon. Russman had escalated to dropping heavy fixtures in under a few weeks. That spelled real danger. Ophelia insisted on a water ring ritual for the banishment. It required a body of water large enough to stand in, plus flammable oil on the surface. She would chant a binding incantation that forced the ghost to manifest fully and then sever its link to me. We had just the right setup, a specialized cell for aquatic inmates, essentially a big soaking pool behind thick glass. Inmates like sirens or mermaids used it, but it was currently empty, so we had privacy and enough space. The irony stung. That cell once housed a siren named Kayla Del Rio, who nearly enthralled me months earlier. We locked the cell behind us, and Parker poured a ring of flammable oil onto the water. Then she lit it, forming a circle of flame that danced on the surface. The cell lights were low, letting the flickers of fire cast tall shadows on the tiled walls. Ophelia led me into the water, telling me to stand in the middle as bait. If Russman wanted revenge, he'd appear to grab me. She would be outside the ring, chanting. My stomach churned with dread, but what choice did I have? Parker stepped aside, letting Ophelia do her thing. The water felt cool around my waist. The stench of burning oil made my eyes water. Ophelia began chanting a melody of half words and hissing syllables, something that vibrated the water at my ankles. The ring of flame glowed bright, reflecting on the cell's damp walls, forming swirling patterns of orange light. Then I felt it. A freezing grip latched onto my shoulder from behind. Russman. I tried to spin around but was yanked under, water rushing into my mouth. Through the swirling flames overhead, I saw Ophelia lunging to grab the silhouette forcibly, but Russman refused to let go of me. The watery world turned dark. Next thing I knew, I stood on firm ground in a realm that smelled of damp leaves and tangy mist. Pinkish fog clung to the ground. Twisted tree stumps protruded from the soil. Everything was silent except for an incessant dripping noise. At my feet lay bits of black water that seemed to reflect no light. I realized Russman stood near me, bullet hole in his forehead, eyes seething with hatred. He pinned me with terrifying ease, hissing about how I'd betrayed humanity by trying to reason with monsters. I argued that the real monsters were men like him, who shot first. My words meant nothing. He hammered me with spectral blows, sneering that I'd now join him in the afterlife, unable to squeak out a victory. Just when I thought my vision might fade, a voice behind him spat, "Well, howdy, motherfucker," and tackled him away from me. That voice. It belonged to Kayla Del Rio, the siren I'd killed months ago. Her face still bore the bullet holes from where she was shot, but she was quite animated, sinking her fangs into Russman's ethereal form. He shrieked, thrashing. Kayla flicked her gaze to me with a wry grin. She told me to get out of there, that she had a job in the afterlife to help fix the damage she'd done in life. If that meant devouring the ghost of the man who threatened me, so be it. I was too shocked to do more than mumble a half thank you. She winked, sinking her jaws deeper into Russman as he wailed. I stumbled off, the pink mist swirling, until everything around me blurred. I awoke spitting water on the cell's tile floor while Parker and Ophelia dragged me free of the pool. My lungs burned. The ring of fire still crackled around the edges, but Russman was nowhere. Ophelia said the banishment completed. Parker exhaled a shaky sigh of relief, telling me not to die on her. I joked that I had no plans to. I glanced at the water's surface, half expecting more poltergeist antics, but saw only flickers of flame. Kayla's cameo in that bizarre afterlife lingered in my mind, but I didn't mention it to Parker or Ophelia. Some stories are better kept private. The following nights, Russman's ghost never appeared in my bedroom again. For the first time in weeks, I slept with the lights off, unafraid. At dawn, I woke up unassaulted, untraumatized. Parker teased me the next morning, calling me the Ghost Whisperer. I retorted that it was thanks to her friend's exorcism. Dr. Samaras noticed the black aura around me had lifted, confirming the spirit's presence was gone. Staff started relaxing around me again. No more jokes about ghost lights flickering overhead. I returned to my real tasks, working with Parker on new policies to reshape Ashurst from a brutal test lab into a prison with actual nuance. We drew up tiers for classifying Fae, from petty offenders who might be rehabilitated to ancient monstrous fiends that required indefinite lockup. The FRB was open to the concept. Imperium oversight demanded we prove the model safe, but it was a step forward. We suspected Russman's old loyalists might grumble, but with him dead and banished, nobody had the clout to sabotage us. As for Kayla Del Rio, the siren from my past, I can't fully parse her cameo. She was definitely gone from this mortal plane. My bullet saw to that. Maybe she ended up in some cosmic halfway realm doing penance for her sins. Maybe she retains enough free will to rescue me from Russman's spirit. The older I get in this job, the more I realize how messy the lines are between life, death, and beyond. If a boss you shot in the head can come back as a ghost to try and kill you, it's not so far-fetched that a siren you shot might show up from purgatory to save you. This place constantly reminds me there's more to reality than I'd ever believe if I lived a normal life. In the days that followed the exorcism, Parker and I hammered out the final details for the tiered offender program. Our new plan: Tier 1 for minor or coerced crimes with a possible short term. Tier 2 for major but not irredeemable felonies, offering partial rehabilitation. Tier 3 for unstoppable ancient monsters that can never be set free. It's more structured than shoot them or forget them. And we think it might prevent fiascos like the one that let Kayla or that Minotaur cause havoc. Some staff balk, claiming Fae are irredeemable, but we can't keep repeating Russman's mistakes. One quiet evening, Parker asked me how I truly felt about Russman. I admitted I still grapple with guilt, wonder if I could have subdued him without lethal force. She told me matter-of-factly that he'd have killed me otherwise, and that I shouldn't romanticize the man's memory. He was a thug disguised as a warden, she said. Then she thanked me for preventing worse damage. I realized she meant it genuinely. She'd returned from her crisis to find him out of control, and if I hadn't stepped in, who knows how many innocents or staff might have died. I let that comfort me somewhat. Maybe I made the only call I could. The ghost's vengeful haunting validated that he wasn't about to see reason anyway. No matter what, I can't discount how the supernatural intersects with even the small details of my life now. For instance, Dr. Samaras has asked me to help re-inspect the runic wards in certain older cell blocks, because if we're bringing in new inmates under a more reform-minded approach, we need to ensure no new poltergeists or spectral illusions can slip out. She told me that Russman's case was eye-opening. If a simple bullet in the head can turn a hateful warden into a poltergeist, it might happen again with other staff or even inmates if we handle them incorrectly. We're adding spiritual hazard training to staff orientation, which, ironically, is something you'd never see in a typical prison. But Ashurst is far from typical. At times, I recall glimpses of Russman's final weeks as a ghost. He mostly lurked near me, but occasionally I saw him glowering at Parker's door. Perhaps he hated her too, for letting me remain. But his main focus was me, the man who pulled the trigger. If he'd had more time to gather power, he might have strangled me in my own bed. Instead, we brought in Ophelia quickly. That memory of treading water in a circle of flame remains seared in my mind. Her chanting, the flickering reflection of the ceiling, the sense of weightless dread. Then the yank downward and everything going black, surreal beyond words. Yet a day in the life for staff at a monster prison. When I wander the halls now, I occasionally see a shape in my peripheral vision, but it's not Russman. Usually it's just illusions from old wards that used to keep fey illusions at bay but are decaying, or I see a flicker of some inmate's powers. If Russman's presence reemerged, I suspect it'd feel colder, more personal. Since the exorcism, the air is lighter. I sleep better. My bed no longer the site of a nightly ghost vigil. Despite everything, I can't pretend shooting Russman was easy. At times, a pang of regret surfaces, not because he deserved mercy, but because crossing that line changed me. Killing a human being, monstrous or not, leaves a mark. The ghostly aftermath hammered home that even in death, one's resentment can linger, twisting into something vile. If nothing else, it reaffirms that lethal force is no solution for every problem. We can't keep repeating Russman's cycle of kill the monstrous inmate. Eventually, that might breed more horrors than it prevents. And ironically, that's precisely the moral we want to embed in the new system. If we treat every being like an unredeemable monster, we risk radicalizing them or ignoring nuance. Some truly are irredeemable, sure. Centuries-old demons feeding on souls, unstoppable half-gods, or savage elder vampires. But others, like that werewolf Regina, ended up in violence more by circumstance than by nature. If we can rehabilitate them under heavy supervision, we might prevent future tragedies. The FRB, for all its might, can't patrol every corner of the world to exterminate every creature. Realistically, working with a portion of them is more sustainable. Warden Parker believes so too. She's turned from a figure of old guard practicality to someone open to reform, especially after seeing how Russman's tyranny almost triggered a meltdown. We're close to finalizing a new tiered approach. Tier 1 for lesser crimes. Tier 2 for major but salvageable offenders. Tier 3 for unstoppable ancients. Each tier has distinct protocols. Tier 1 inmates might eventually get short-term sentences. Tier 2 might be eligible for a specialized parole if they show real progress, and Tier 3 remains indefinite. The Imperium demands real guarantees that we can keep the dangerous ones locked away. We're working on that, installing better wards, consulting new runic experts. It's a slow process, but we're building a kinder, more rational prison from the ruins Russman left behind. Sometimes I wonder if we risk incurring more spiritual backlashes. If Russman could come back from a bullet, might some ancient vampire we stake or demon we banish do the same in a worse form? The staff are increasingly paranoid about that, but at least we have guidelines now for exorcisms. Parker's rewriting a portion of the staff manual to mention contacting approved external occult specialists if a staff member suspects a haunting or spectral manifestation. It's surreal to see a formal prison memo about exorcisms, but that's Ashurst, half Black Ops research facility, half monster prison, half occult labyrinth, always teetering on chaos. In quieter moments, I reflect on Kayla Del Rio. She was no saint. She enthralled me and nearly used me as a puppet to free more sirens. I ended her with a bullet as well. Yet ironically, in that ephemeral pink realm, she saved me from Russman. If an enthralling siren can find some post-death redemption, maybe that's a sign we can't easily label beings purely monstrous. Kayla's cameo, ephemeral as it was, gave me hope that even the darkest souls might have nuances. Or perhaps she was just fulfilling some cosmic bargain. The afterlife in this reality is murky and layered. Ghosts like Russman can form from hatred, while others like Kayla might be on a path to atone. When I share these musings with Dr. Samaras, she half smiles and says that Gorgons also have an afterlife tradition involving penance. She jokes that if she ever dies on duty, she might appear to me as a ghost with snakes for hair. The idea unsettles me, but I respond that maybe we do an exorcism for her too. We laugh, though it's a sad, heavy kind of humor, the sort you develop in a place like Ashurst. Many nights now I no longer keep the lamp burning. I let the darkness settle, unafraid of a black silhouette at the foot of my bed. My dreams are calmer, though sometimes I get fleeting nightmares of the pinkish mist or see the shadows of Kayla and Russman locked in a cosmic tussle. I wake up sweaty but relieved that it's just echoes. Russman can't harm me anymore, and Kayla, wherever she is, she's not haunting me. That's enough for me to carry on. Still, the job is what it is. Tomorrow, I have to evaluate 3 potential parole candidates. A dryad who attacked hikers in her forest, a vampire who fed on multiple victims but now claims remorse, and a werewolf with partial control. That's the daily grunt work of implementing the new system. Each one has a unique backstory, magical triggers, and reasons behind their crimes. If we can prove genuine rehabilitation, we might set them free eventually. If not, indefinite lockup or, in the worst cases, a discreet execution. The Imperium demands results. Maybe we'll pioneer a method that other Fey prisons can adopt, bridging the gap between fearful extermination and naive leniency. That's my hope, at least. Occasionally, I stand by the corridor where I shot Russman, remembering the moment he threatened to kill me and the inmate. The bullet's impact changed everything. Not just removing him from leadership, but eventually unleashing his ghost. If I had to do it again, I probably would. Let's face it, he was seconds away from murdering an inmate in cold blood. Another staffer might have died next. My bullet saved multiple lives, though it also brought the curse of his poltergeist. In the grand scheme, it was worth it. If a part of Russman lingers out there in the nether realms, hopefully he's found something else to fixate on. Or hopefully Kayla's presence forced him into oblivion. Life at Ashurst remains a swirling carnival of supernatural anomalies. Demons trying to mind control guards, minotaurs smashing sublevels, sirens testing new illusions. Yet it's manageable, especially without Russman's constant tension choking us. Warden Parker is making real strides toward a better facility culture. The FRB is sending more moderate staff. A few old Russman loyalists still lurk, but they keep their heads down, not wanting to end up like him. In a sense, the dead warden's final legacy is ironically that his tyrannical method died with him, making space for a new era. If only he could see how we're rewriting the rules, I'm sure his ghost would have erupted in fury. But that ghost is banished. Let him rest or rot wherever unquiet spirits go. There's an old saying among staff here at Ashurst, nothing ever truly ends. We see it with cyclical inmate breakouts, with ancient curses reappearing, with older staff returning from retirement to help. That's proven true of Russman's revenge from beyond. But this time, we found a way to finalize his ending. And if another ghost emerges, we'll do the same. We're actually drafting an official procedure for exorcisms, ironically titled Post-Mortem Staff Hostility Protocol. The powers that be demand everything be in writing, so future staff might read the instructions. If you kill your boss in self-defense and he returns as a vengeful ghost, contact an approved exorcist and follow standard containment steps. It sounds ridiculous, but that's standard for a monster prison. Sometimes I recall the ephemeral realm where Russman pinned me, the pinkish mist and those twisted roots underfoot. The memory sets my nerves on edge. The afterlife or a side dimension? Hard to say. The old diaries in Ashurst speak of hidden mirror realms, or astral planes where spirits roam if they cling too hard to hatred or regret. Kayla's presence there aligns with that lore. Maybe it's not truly the afterlife, but a fractured zone shaped by strong psychic energies. Regardless, I'm grateful Kayla used her chance at cosmic community service to keep me alive. Her bullet holes were still visible, but her expression was calmer than in life, as if she'd made peace with her fate. Maybe in time, that realm will let her move on too. I never told Parker about Kayla's cameo. She'd want details like how Kayla ended up there, or if other inmates might share that plane. I'm not sure I have an answer, and part of me doesn't want that knowledge used to open a new line of research. Enough staff at Ashurst would love to tap into the afterlife for resources. I'd rather let sleeping dogs lie, or in this case, let sleeping sirens remain in their cosmic corners. The bottom line is that Kayla's intervention was a personal experience. She saved me, and that's enough. Now, as I finalize this monstrous block of text, it's well past midnight. My lamp is on low, but I'm not afraid of seeing Russman's silhouette. The only shadows belong to my desk fan and the faint shapes cast by the overhead light. My mind drifts to how next morning I need to meet with a rehabilitated minotaur who's shown progress in therapy. Shocking, but real. We might place him in a Tier 2 program with supervised labor. Then I have to interview a demon who claims to have found religion, ironically. All in a day's work. The place is never boring. Inmates test boundaries, older staff push back on new policies, and we keep discovering new anomalies. A ghoul that reanimates dead insects, a werewolf lamia hybrid, or an imprisoned spirit that's half succubus. And yet, I can handle it better than ever now that I'm not second-guessing every footsteps in the corridor, wondering if Russman's ghost is yanking me out of bed to throw me into a pit. Perhaps one day, this entire approach of containing and studying monstrous beings will face a reckoning. Some Imperium lords want them all destroyed, others see them as potential allies or resources. Asher stands in the middle, forging a tenuous compromise that occasionally backfires. Russman was an extreme outcome of that old, fear-based policy. My shooting him, ironically, might have accelerated a shift towards something more balanced. Don't misunderstand me. Life remains dangerous here, but at least we aim for a measure of humanity, or the closest approximation possible when dealing with vampiric man-eaters or dreadlord demons. If I've learned anything from Russman's ghost, it's that hatred rarely dies with the body. If left unchecked, it festers into something more potent. So in a sense, our new polices revolve around mitigating that cycle. We contain truly irredeemable threats, but for those who acted out of necessity or ignorance, maybe there's a chance to break the chain of violence before it births more vengeance. Like Russman's spirit. That ghost was an intangible manifestation of old grudges, refusing the final rest, and it almost took me with it. Only a borderline miraculous exorcism and the unexpected cameo of a siren I once killed spared me from a fate worse than death. Let that be a lesson on how the cruelty of men might become something monstrous if not tempered. I'd be lying if I claimed complete closure. Russman's final sneer still haunts me in daydreams, the memory of his cold grip on my throat in that watery exorcism. But I'm not looking over my shoulder for him. I assume Kayla or the exorcism ended that threat. Each night I crawl into bed, read a few pages of case files on a werewolf who might join Tier 1 parole, flick off the lamp, and drift off. Sleep comes easier. My dreams revolve around typical job stress or fleeting nonsense, not a looming silhouette. Now I can devote my mental energy to forging a better Ashurst. I keep an eye on Parker, too. She lost a chunk of faith in the old system after dealing with tragedies. She might still hold secrets, but at least we share the goal of preventing more fiascos. I'd prefer never again to hear about a staff member forced to kill a superior, or an inmate shot for a minor slip. If that means restructuring half the prison, so be it. The FRB watchers sometimes loom overhead, but so far they've not objected. Maybe they realize a meltdown at Ashurst would be cataclysmic for everyone. Whenever I pass Russman's old office, I feel a pang. That place is half boarded up now, used mainly as a supply closet. Sometimes staff mention hearing faint knocks from behind the door or a sensation of being watched. I suspect leftover psychic residue, but no real poltergeist. Ophelia's exorcism presumably severed Russman's tie. If any shadows remain, they're just echoes that can't manifest. We'll probably do a thorough cleansing eventually. For now, we leave it alone. The staff prefer not to mention Russman's name if they can help it. Late at night, I occasionally step outside to the prison yard, scanning the horizon. The facility is half buried in a remote region, ringed by towering fences and magical wards. I watch the moon overhead, remembering how, not long ago, we were dealing with an out-of-control werewolf riot. In that time, Russman was still alive, eager to shoot any beast that sneezed. Now that he's gone, and ironically come back and gone again, maybe we have a shot at taming these cycles of violence. The night breeze sometimes feels colder, but at least it's not loaded with hatred. I'll never forget the watery exorcism. The circle of flame dancing on the surface, the stench of gasoline, Ophelia's incantation, the moment Russman's hands yanked me down. Then that pinkish realm, Kayla's savage grin as she pounced on him. Surreal. If I told a normal person about it, they'd think I was insane. But in a monster prison, it's just another day. It's almost comedic how quickly I had to adapt to the idea that not only do ghosts exist, but my ex-boss's ghost specifically decided to kill me. Then a siren I'd shot stepped in from beyond the grave to help me. That's par for the course in my line of work, I guess. I do worry that something else might fill Russman's vacuum. The prison has deeper sublevels full of older, more ancient horrors. Ones that might try to exploit the changes in leadership. Some staff rumor that an old fae sleeps in the sealed sub-basement, a being older than recorded history. If it stirs, we'd have a crisis. But at least Parker is a warden who listens to reason. She'll consult me, Samaras, or other staff before letting a Russman 2.0 rampage unchecked. My hope is to keep refining these new policies, so we can survive any meltdown without resorting to mass shootings or draconian experiments. If there's one message I'd emphasize to anyone reading this monstrous account, it's that hatred is not so easily buried. If you kill someone out of necessity or vengeance, sometimes that's not the end. It can come back. That's especially true in a world brimming with supernatural energies. Russman let his bitterness metastasize into a post-mortem poltergeist. Kayla, ironically, found a chance to do something redemptive in the afterlife. The line between monstrous inmate, lethal warden, heroic staff, it's all blurred. Everyone is shaped by environment, power, and fear. Some become beasts, some find redemption, some become ghosts. My role is to keep forging a path where fewer tragedies happen, fewer bullets are fired, and maybe we handle each crisis with a shred more empathy. I might not always succeed, but it's worth trying. So that's the tale. I shot Warden Russman in the head. He came back as a ghost to kill me. I nearly drowned in an exorcism, was rescued by the spirit of a siren I'd previously killed, and now I sleep unmolested by vengeful silhouettes. My job continues as we rebuild Ashurst's approach to monstrous incarceration. We test the waters with potential parole for lesser offenders. We keep the truly dangerous locked in deep wards, and we refine policies about intangible threats like ghosts. Maybe in a year we'll have a blueprint that other prisons adopt. Or maybe we'll face another meltdown. Working with Fae means chaos is always near. Either way, I do it with fewer nightmares. No midnight poltergeist dropping the ceiling on me, and a sense that every day we're inching away from Russman's era of brutality. My life remains strange, but it's better than living under the old warden's rule, alive or ghostly. If I had to do it all again, I wouldn't change much, except maybe I'd push for the exorcism sooner. Let that be a final note to the wise. If your ex-boss tries to kill you from beyond the grave, call in an exorcist right away. Don't endure weeks of poltergeist antics. Life's too short for that, especially in a place brimming with real horrors. Good riddance, Russman. Let me focus on living monsters, not the grudges of the dead.